Black like me. Black like me. Black like me.
You're listening to Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G., a podcast that invites you to experience the world through the perspective of one Black man, one conversation, one story, or even one rant at a time. Here's Dr. G.
Hey, good people. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G. I have a fantastic episode for you today. I have four amazing guests who I'll be introducing in just a moment. But I asked myself this morning, I'm asking you this, what do these guests have in common with James Baldwin, Audre Lorde, Maya Angelou, Marian Wright Edelman, Ta-Nehisi Coates, James Meredith, Henry Louis Gates, and Alice Walker? They're all expats. I just named you a list of famous Black people who lived in France, Turkey, Mexico, Germany, Ghana, the Soviet Union, France, Nigeria, Tanzania, and Kenya. American folks who said, let me see what life is like abroad, hence the term expat. It's a person who's living in a country other than that of their original citizenship. And so today I have four amazing individuals who I'm excited, even a little bit nervous to interview because there's so much good stuff to talk about. Like one of the four guests is Shar Winter, who is the founder and CEO of Expat and the Feats Meet Land travel and inspiration brand. Shar is equipped with her own insight from expat journeys to over 50 countries. And that is amazing. And it has this mantra, go where you grow and never stop exploring. A Detroit native, but resides in Lisbon, Portugal. Next, we have Margo Gabrielle. And Margo is from Miami, Florida, but also moved to Boston, Massachusetts at the age of 10. Margo is a freelance writer, cookbook author of the Expat Kitchen. You're going to need to get a copy of that. Margo is also based in Portugal. Margo has a motto that says, live each day, one day at a time, and make it a masterpiece. My third guest is Huete Gatane, and I know she's going to correct me on that because I was practicing before this, but who is a podcast producer, passionate about people telling their stories and helping to better understand themselves. And listen, she has produced for the New York Times show Together Apart, Priya Parker, and Gimlet's Where Should We Begin? That's really, really impressive. Trained in public policy, worked as a senior research analyst at the MDRC, a leading social policy research institution. Originally born in Ethiopia and has lived in several corners of the world, including Maputo, Mozambique, and a tiny Amish town called Kidron, Ohio. Currently living in Lisbon, Portugal. Lisbon's got it going on, exploring the topic of Black joy. Oh, snap, because that is the theme of this season. And last but not least, my colleague, Diara Parker, originally from Chicago. I won't read her Go Bears comment, but after taking some time off to intern and travel in South America following her undergraduate studies, Diara returned to Madison and began a deeper dive in social services in the field of domestic abuse intervention services, where she managed all crisis intake programs. Her most recent role, Diara served as the Director of Public and Systems Change to End Domestic Abuse, Wisconsin, or End Abuse, leading statewide equity-centered strategy development, systems analysis, training, and other change management efforts for county-level multidisciplinary teams focusing on improving their community's response to domestic violence, sexual assault, and other forms of oppression. Diara is currently the Vice President of Operations for EQT by Design, and we work together and Diara is one of the lead instructors for a program that I've designed that's called the Justified Anger Leadership Institute. It trains and develops emerging Black leaders in our community who are seeking to grow in their own leadership styles while navigating predominantly white spaces. And Diara is phenomenal. Thank you all so much. I got everybody right. I didn't leave anybody. I've never had 4 guests on at what time. How are you all doing this morning?
Phenomenal.
Wonderful. Yeah.
It's another sunny day in Lisbon, Portugal, so I'm feeling great.
All the natural light. I love it.
Oh my goodness. I have so many questions for you all. Now, one of the things I do on my podcast is I ask what's called Black icebreakers. I've learned that some of this is also generational. So younger folks like you all may not know some of the things that I'm asking. So I'll try to do the things that are sensitive to younger generations. But let me ask this first one, which I ask almost all my guests, except that my mic dropped because I don't have any guests on there. Grits or cream of wheat?
Grits.
All day.
Easy.
Easy.
Grits. Okay, let me see if there might be any weak links on here. There's any weak links. Grits with sugar or grits with salt? Grits with
salt.
sugar.
Salt and cheese.
Salt.
Salt and cheese. Salt.
Nobody's a grits and sugar person.
No.
Tiara, you're from Chicago. You're supposed to put sugar in. This is where I learned to eat. That's where I learned to eat grits. I was born in Chicago. Oh my, salt and cheese. And so is it a breakfast food? Because I certainly understand the cheese and the shrimp if it's more of a dinner meal. But for me, it was a hot breakfast cereal. So did you all eat it? Did any of you eat it for breakfast also?
Breakfast, and then as an adult, brunch because of shrimp and grits in Atlanta. Yeah.
Oh, see, when I was a kid, I put butter on it so the butter would swim on top.
Ooh.
And then I break my toast over in it, toast up with grape jelly on it. And then I take my crispy bacon and break it up, and then I put my scrambled eggs in it. Because my mom would leave off to work and my grandmother would make me breakfast before school. And I still make it for my daughter. She's 25. When she comes home on the weekends, I call it a grit bowl. And so I put all of it in one bowl. We have a time. Now, my
Margo,
wife, Jackie.
Margo, you taking notes?
Yeah, Margo, you should be putting this in your cookbook.
Yeah, oh, Margo, please. Margo, listen. And my wife is from Alabama. And so she eats it with salt as well. So we used to fight over my daughter, Lexi. No, try it with some salt. No, honey, try it with some sugar. I'll take you to the park if you try it with some salt. I'm going to make you do your homework if you don't try some sugar. And so I love that.
You know,
Hey,
it's
listen.
interesting.
Oh,
I hadn't
please, go
had
ahead.
grits. I hadn't had grits until I became an adult and came to the US because I grew up in Ethiopia. So grits were like not a thing.
Sure.
But then when I discovered them, it was the only thing.
Yes. The only thing.
You have to have some bacon to break off with it. I mean, that's just like
You have to. The bacon sets it off. A few times I've had black guests and they said cream of wheat, and I just cut the interview short. I just said, look, I'm having technical difficulties, and just unplug the computer. Listen, you all have you've lived and worked in the U.S. You've participated in universities and colleges at various levels. Have you ever been asked? Have you ever been called or referred to as articulate?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Because that's like the highest compliment a white person can give a black person, like that and being clean. But
it was in grad school. It was
in grad school.
Yeah, one of my I was studying public policy, and my policy analysis professor was just so impressed at how articulate I was, and I thought, okay, like I'm not really sure what to make of it, but she went on to make comments about my hair, so that tells you everything you need to know.
Oh my goodness. That leads me to my whole next question. Have you ever been asked, could someone touch your hair?
Yes.
I've never been asked to just go ahead and touch it.
They don't. No, I'm sorry. What was that, Margo?
I've never been asked because they just go ahead and like take the liberty to touch my hair without asking. So.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. DR, how about you? Did people just take the liberties or ask?
I've had both. I've had folks who just like Margo decided to reach their hand in, and so I give them a little dip, like, no, please don't do that. And then I've also had
I don't know where your hands have
ask.
been.
Mhm.
Exactly. And it's just wild to me that people think that they think that way, that they think that I'm a thing for them to touch and to without my consent, So I've had that come up quite a bit. Even at a conference, actually, I was out at a bar, and a woman just went up and touched my head, and it was wild.
Right.
This
Oh,
was
Shar,
recent?
No,
oh,
years ago.
years ago. Shar, now you shook your head, so no one's ever taken the liberty or have asked you?
Thankfully, no, but I think that's because my hair was relaxed for so long. So this natural buzz cut, whatever you want to call it, a faded cut is new. So
Gotcha.
I don't think it was a need for anyone to touch it because it was straight. So at the time, yeah.
Sure. I went to a predominantly white school growing up here in Madison, and kids would touch my hair all the time. And now you all, but like, I'm 57, so I came of age in the 70s. And so I used to have a, pretty decent sized fro. And you got to work to get that thing even. You got to pick it out and then you got to pat it in. And people just put their hands in it, and then because I use hair grease, or hair oil, Afro Sheen. Then people would say, "Ugh," and they would want to wipe their hands on my shirt. But to your point, Diara, to make us a novelty and to just think, yeah, we're free. Just put your hands, in my my hair. I've worn a brush cut probably since college. And during the pandemic, I didn't go to the barbershop. So I decided to try twisting it. It doesn't look like it right now because I had to pat it all down to get it even for the show. But when I first started, folks would do that. I was Diara, we were getting ready to start our US Black History course. Like 250 people in the room. And this woman, her hand came towards my head, and then she caught herself. I think she listened to the podcast, and I think she thought, wait, no, you're not supposed to do that. And then she pulled her hand back real fast. But like, her hand was on her way to my head. And I would never think to invade someone's personal space, to touch anything on them, not their collar, not a pin or a badge they're wearing or a beret I just don't get it. And so many of my listeners ear hustle because they're white or non-Black, and they want to understand how Black people see the world and see some of their actions. And so when I ask these Black icebreakers, people lean in because they can't believe that guest after guest after guest have some of the same reactions to being called articulate or being asked if they could touch your hair. And there's a whole nother list of questions that we ask. But for them, it's just amazing that we're colleagues and neighbors, but they have no idea that these other little weird things happen in our lives. So thank you for indulging me. Hey, first question, and you all can just jump in. You're friends, and so I'm sure you all are used to talking over each other or jumping in. And just having fun. So don't feel like you just got to raise your hands so that I can call on you. But just tell me, who would like to take the stab in telling me how long you all have known each other?
I know. It feels like longer than it's been because of the connection has been so organic. But I want to say it was Naki's tour for me with everyone. I met you all on the African
6 months.
Tour.
Yeah, 6 months.
I met you, Shar, at Sin's Valentine's. So that was that February.
Yeah,
I met Shar in February of this year, and then I met maybe Hiwote next in May. Oh no, I can't remember where. I met you, Diara.
Oh, so not a long time.
Either.
No, it
might have been this year. So
yeah, much longer.
Wow,
so just a couple months.
Yeah.
So Margo, what was, and so I could tell there's a connection here that you all have become fast friends. So Margo, let me start with you. What was your first exposure to international travel?
Wow, my first trip abroad was to, I want to say, Haiti in 2007. I went there for one of my older sister's wedding. It was a destination wedding, and I think I might have still been in college. And it was awesome. I was a little nervous because I'd never left the States before, and it was my first time meeting a lot of my cousins and a lot of my father's siblings. So it was just like super, super emotionally packed, but I loved it. And just to be on the ground in Haiti and to see the beauty of the island that's not portrayed in the media was really eye-opening. And I think at that point I realized, like, okay, I need to do more of this. So I knew I was going to travel. I just didn't know like how that was going to come together as a college student. And so once I returned to the States, I would travel domestically to California or to New York often. And then once I started working professionally, then I would just take off But yeah, 2007 was my first trip to
Haiti.
the
Shar, how
Caribbean,
about
to
you?
Haiti.
No, that's great, Mark. How about you, Shar?
Yeah.
Yeah, my first international trip, I was pretty young, less than 10. My grandma took us back to, my parents are from Jamaica, grandma as well. And we went back to the
Wow.
country in Jamaica where my grandma and mother grew up. And it was amazing experience because
Oh,
that was the moment when I just started, I fell in love with travel because it was so different than home, than Detroit. But yet they didn't have all these material things and all these like advanced, what I call now like luxuries or whatever, but they were so happy, so content. And I'm thinking to myself, like, man, that's when I was young, but it made sense to me. I'm like, people are, you don't need the material things to be happy. So the seed was planted pretty early with the travel bug. And it's like as soon as I got money, I was like, I'm getting out of here. The only thing that stopped me was financial, right? And so what I would
right.
do was find different ways at school, like when I was in college, to apply for, like I would write papers for conferences that were like abroad. I never got abroad, but I got to Hawaii for free for writing a paper. So I would do whatever it took to like
Wow.
I didn't have the money to get myself the experience of traveling.
Oh, I love it. Huete, how about you? What was your first international experience?
It's so interesting. When I was born and raised in Ethiopia for the first 5 years of my life. And when I was 5, we moved the whole family to Mozambique. So that was my first experience of being like, I'm in a new world. They speak a different language. I have, and we stayed there for 7 years. We would come back and forth. We would visit Ethiopia every summer, every Christmas. And then again, it was when I turned 15 that I moved from Ethiopia to the US. So really like my first expatriatism was to the United States. And then once I became American, that bug was reignited and I was like, okay, I have stability here. I know I felt some sense of belonging. And then it became, how can I go back out? How can I explore? How can I expand my worldview? So, I would take vacations and stuff. But when I came to visit Lisbon 4 years ago, I thought I have to figure out how to live here at some point, somehow.
I love it. I love it. And Diara, how about you?
So this was taking me down memory lane, just reflecting about this a little bit. So my first exposure to international travel was actually when I was around 9 or 10. My family and I, we used to travel a lot to Mexico. We spent a lot of time in the Caribbean. And this would not just be my parents. We would bring extended family. So we would have aunts and uncles and cousins. So it was this really big family affair. And my parents didn't grow up the way that I did. And so the fact that they were able to expose me to all of this international travel on at least one side of the world at such a young age really, like what they said, sparked this energy in me about all of the different things around the world, all the different people and cultures and food and experiences that I could have. And so as a young person, a young adult, I had the opportunity to travel to South America a few times, and as an older adult, had an opportunity to move to Europe, and planned initially on traveling here for a bit and seeing what emerged and where my husband and I would want to settle. And then COVID happened. We had a couple of trips planned to this side of the world, and we had to kind of reframe that. And it just the last year really had me reflecting on what do I want to do? Where do I want to be? What are some things that I have yet to do? And that's what sparked the move to Lisbon. The other thing that I wanted to mention outside of the international travel is, as a young person, I remember taking a lot of road trips with my parents. So on random weekends, we would hop in the car and they would say, Diara, pick a direction. And we would just travel all around Wisconsin, all around the Midwest, with coolers in the back, extra blankets, and we would just hop out of the car and stop and see what we found. And so I still have that in me, wherever I am, I love just getting lost in the neighborhoods and lost in different places and seeing what comes up. So that exposure has definitely had a lasting impact on my travels today, for sure.
I love those stories. So which of you moved to Portugal first?
I would probably say It's weird because I came
I,
between me and
I
Margo.
came here. Yeah, I feel like you were here before me. I came in
I
October
came,
of last year.
It was kind of strange how I got here because of COVID. The decision was like not as planned. It was like come over as a tourist first, and then realizing like, oh gosh, I got to really make a decision soon. So, but I came last summer.
So this is recent.
Yeah, I mean, all of us have
Like for all of you, like the last year,
it's all
or
during
Yeah.
COVID, pretty much. These are all COVID moves.
Yeah,
Wow.
for sure.
Yep.
I was having a conversation with Diara, during this leadership institute. It runs for sometimes 6 to 8 months, and so we're just talking and processing, and Diara just sort of casually said, "Hey, I'm moving to Portugal," and my head started spinning a little bit. And I said, "Oh no, I've enjoyed working with you. You're going to be in Portugal," and she said, "Oh." I'm going to still be working for EQT. I'm going to still be, working, with this leadership institute if you still want me to. And I was about to ask how, but then I realized with COVID, people have been working, safer from home. But that's when it really clicked that not only could people vacation and still call into meetings, but you could live someplace else in the world and still keep your job, back, back at what had been your home. And that's amazing to me. So I want to ask you all, and please jump in, at your own will, but who modeled this expat thing for you? Who did you look to? I mean, I named people like Audre Lorde and Frederick Douglass and James Baldwin, but were there people in your lives who did it and talked about it that made you say, I can do this as a Black person, as a Black professional. I can move on the other side of the world away from my family, and I'm going to make it work. Who'd like to take a stab at that?
I like to say 100% it was my mom and my grandmother because they weren't considered expats, more so immigrants. But
Sure.
to me, the level of trust, faith, and just wisdom that's needed back then to have made the leap from a
Yes.
country to another, from Jamaica to the US, with way less resources than what I have and way less support. And just I don't know, it's very impressive to me. And my grandma makes comments sometimes calling me brave because I previously moved to London first, and she just thought that was so brave. And then when I moved to Portugal, she's like, "Oh, you don't know because I didn't know the language." And she calls me brave so often, but I'm like, Mom, I call my grandmother Mama. I'm like, Mama, you're the brave one. You took that
Right,
leap
right.
with literally no, I mean, you have to
Wow.
think about all of the things that I have access to that they didn't. And because they lived in the country, it would take months sometimes for things to get back to the country. So imagine like not hearing from your children, know if they're okay. It's just so many. That's brave to me. So
Yes.
that sacrifice,
Great
that level of
insight.
faith, that gave me inspiration for my moves abroad. I just knew I would be okay. I just knew it.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm.
Yeah.
Shar, you brought up something very interesting. Oh, someone's about to say something. Please jump in. Was that you, Margo?
No.
Oh, dear.
Go ahead, Dr. G.
For people who are listening, like an expat is a person. It sometimes it's considered short term, or it could be someone who gives up their own citizenship to live in another country. But to the point of your mother and your grandmother, Shar, an immigrant is someone who leaves their home country, usually under duress, or many times under duress, moving to another country for citizenship, for work, and economic stability. Is that how you differentiate between a person who's an immigrant and a person who's considered an expat?
Yeah, it's such a oh gosh. So it's hard because everyone has a different definition. But the reason I would
Sure.
say my parents and grandparents would have been my grandmother would have been immigrant versus an expat is because I think they knew when they were leaving that it was a permanent move.
Got you.
And they were
Got you.
seeking citizenship. They weren't giving up their citizenship in Jamaica, but they were seeking citizenship in the US where I mean, for me, it's permanent.
Sure.
Right?
Right. That's another one of my questions. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it. Wow.
Technically, I'm an immigrant too. Technically, honestly,
No,
yeah.
I got you.
Mhm.
This is amazing. And so now in Portugal, people might think, oh, that's near Spain. I remember when I was studying Spanish in school, I remember saying, okay, Portuguese is not Spanish. So I'm decent in Spanish, but Portuguese, man, I have to work at it. It looks a little bit like Italian and some French in it. So are you learning the languages? Are you in sort of like Portuguese as a second language program?
Yeah. So
Portuguese.
what'd you say, Shar?
Poco follow Portuguese. Did I say it?
Okay then.
Portuguesa. That's how we would say it in Spanish.
So what's cool for me is that the 7 years my family spent in Mozambique meant I learned Portuguese at a very young age. And
yes.
what I thought would happen is that all of that memory would just come back when I was in a city where everyone was speaking Portuguese.
Yes.
But what you forget is that when you're a kid, your vocabulary is very limited. So you only ever knew a few words. So the accent is not hard for me, but I have a tutor. I meet with her once a week for an hour. She gives me homework and I try to speak in Portuguese when I'm out, even though in Lisbon, it's very easy to not learn Portuguese. Everybody speaks English. So it's very, very easy to get by. But yeah, I am learning Portuguese.
I'll be taking classes at some point as well.
Okay, you will, Margo. Did any of you get pushback from your family? Like, no, don't do that. You can't move over there. That's crazy.
Ooh,
Yeah, I did.
So Shar is saying no. Diara, you're saying
absolutely.
Yes. From siblings, from parents, from friends,
from my mom, and it's so funny too because my mom in a past life, her previous career, she traveled all around the world. She's been literally all around the world, and so it was surprising to me a bit. But I am the baby. I'm her only baby, and so I can appreciate where that was coming from. But when I first told her that we were moving, she cried and she said, I think you're making a big mistake. I don't want you to leave. What are you doing? What about, your job? What about family and friends? And at that point, when her and I had the conversation, I was already so grounded in my decision that, what I said was, I don't want you to be sad. I don't want you to be upset. And I'm moving to Lisbon. And so, what can we do to help with the feelings that are coming up for you? And now we're in a much better space, and she's trying to move over here as well. So we've come a long way.
Is she really?
She sure is.
That's awesome.
Yes, my dad is a dual Irish citizen, and so they can really come over whenever they'd like. And so, we've come a long way for sure.
That is awesome.
Awesome.
Wait, how did your family respond? Did you get support from family and friends about moving to Lisbon? Although you've moved internationally, but just curious.
Yeah, I mean, every other time I've moved internationally, it's been, to Shar's point, right? Like either it was my whole family going somewhere, or I was going from Ethiopia to the US for the purposes of a better education. So to live in the country that my mom, worked so hard to get us to, and then to say, I am unhappy here and I want something different and something that I think is better, was really hard for my mom to understand. So everyone else in my family, all my friends, everyone was very supportive. I also never painted it as super permanent, mostly because I don't know where I'll be, but like even saying I'm going to go for the next 6 to 12 months, I got pushback like, what about your safety? And, easy to answer. It's like, Portugal is one of the safest countries in the world. What about COVID? It's like, I'm living in New York and quarantined to my apartment. So what's the difference? So what about friends? It's like, there's a community of beautiful Black people there that I will, build a community with. So I think that appeased the fear a little bit. And now it's been 6 months and I think my whole family just sees how happy I am. And they're the ones that say, including my mom, I don't think you're ever coming back. So yeah, It's funny because I still think like, I think my life will be I was living in New York. So between Portugal and New York. And they're like, no, babe, you're never coming back.
Hi, this is Dan Groupie from Monona, Wisconsin. I listen to Black Like Me because it brings alive for me what it means to be a Black person living in Wisconsin and living in the United States through people's stories and lived experiences. And this show has helped me to understand my role as a white person in either allowing racial disparities and injustices to be perpetuated or to take a more active role in dismantling these systems. And I'm a Patreon supporter because I feel like it's critical to amplify this message and help bring more people to the fight.
The award-winning Black Like Me podcast has a reach throughout the U.S. in over 100 countries around the world. It is the work of a dedicated team of people here in Madison, Wisconsin, dedicated to changing the conversation surrounding race. When you sign up to support Black Like Me as a patron, you support the work that they are doing and help create better quality content and a better society. By going to patreon.com/blacklikeme and signing up at any of the levels offered, you are not only signing up to make a monthly donation, you are also joining a growing community of people interested in engaging the issue of race with a raw, unprecedented honesty. As a patron of the podcast, you will have access to exclusive content like extended interviews, bonus rants, and video chats with Dr. G. You will also have a chance to join the conversation that other patrons are already having with Dr. G about race in America. To become a patron of the show, go to patreon.com/blacklikeme or see the link in our show notes. And for as little as $2, you can support these important conversations and the work that Dr. G is doing. Thank you in advance.
It's so wonderful to hear young Black professionals talk about, maybe my life will stretch between Lisbon and New York City, because growing up, it was jet setters in the movies who did things like that. It was the Gabor sisters, like you all too young to know who they are, but just it was the rich and the famous who talked about, oh, I live in France in in the winter, and then I come back to Miami and but to hear you all talk about it so casually, it's just really amazing. The theme of this this series is Black joy. So tell me about that. How has your Black joy been accelerated or been experienced? How has living abroad, and listen, we're frank. You can tell the truth. You can cuss. You can drop the F-bomb. I mean, this isn't regulated by FCC. But yeah. So please, just you lived in Detroit, you lived in Boston, you lived in Madison, you're born in Chicago, you've lived in Mozambique and in Puto, you lived around the world, and now you're talking about joy in a place that's not considered the greatest nation in the world. We celebrate the fact that this is the greatest nation where dreams can come true, and you all are on here smiling and beaming and glowing as expats because there's something you're getting in Portugal that you didn't get in the US. And there's something that you're not getting, that you're not experiencing there, that you always experience here. And so I want to hear everyone just sort of talk about how you're experiencing Black joy. So let me start. Let me see who's I'm trying to remember this. Who's doing the podcast? Who's doing a study on Black joy?
I am.
That's you.
Huete. Yeah.
Huete, please let me have you jump in first, Huete. I was just trying to see who's doing that. So talk to me about your Black joy in the midst of all of this.
Yeah. So for me, the deep exploration specifically about the joy of Black people came in grew right in the midst of the murders of George Floyd, of Breonna Taylor, of Ahmaud Arbery, when I felt, and we collectively felt just deep shared pain. And then I'd, watch protests or attend protests or read everything Black people were doing on the internet. And it was centered around our joy. Even in this deeply painful moment, we found ways to dance, to share experiences, food, love, joy, because we wanted, almost like we wanted an anchor, right? Like we wanted something to pull us forward and to anchor our vision of what freedom might look like. So that's when I started thinking about this as an idea, like how have we done that for generations past, and how do we do that for generations moving forward? So the question driving my research, and that's going to drive the show about Black joy that I'm making, is how might we as Black people cultivate deeply joyful lives for ourselves as individuals, and then also for us as a community. And I think that American culture, Western culture in general, perpetuates this idea that you are responsible for you, and that's that. And the reality is we are deeply interconnected. So what happens to you affects me. And yes, I am responsible for myself and you are responsible for yourself, but we also have to acknowledge that many of our experiences are shared, and we co-create many of the experiences that, we have as a society. So I had to really prioritize my own joy. I was living in the studio apartment in New York City, paying a ridiculous rent, and just to be on a Zoom call with my coworkers for several hours a day. And I was like, what am I doing? I know that I love water. I know that I love learning new languages. I know that I want to explore new places. What am I waiting for? What do I need to happen in order for me to actually explore that? And it was literally overnight where I had a conversation with my bosses and I was like, I think I'd like to live in Lisbon. And for now, I'm thinking of it as like a 6-month thing. But if it works out and if it doesn't interfere with my job, I'd like to do it for longer. But let's figure that out once I get there. But even for the show that we're making around joy, I want to explore the joy of Black people everywhere, not just the Black American experience. So yeah, and I didn't think I would necessarily be more joyful in Portugal. I knew I would be more joyful in the exploration of something new.
Sure.
But Portugal has fed me in ways I never ever expected, and a lot of it for me has been the distance. So
can you name one of those things in which it's fed you? Portugal has fed you?
Yeah, I mean, I think literally the food is quite incredible. Yeah, like that is the easiest one to name. But I also think being Black American in Portugal affords you certain privileges that are just, yeah, for sure. And this is a class issue, right? Like that's the bright side as a Black American, but there is also the shadow side to that, which is when you start exploring the experiences of Black Portuguese people here, it's at a cost that you have this positive experience because you're Black and American. So it is complicated, but I think like being around such beautiful architecture that your ancestors have built, like being close to the water, people being incredibly nice, actually having access to healthcare that takes care of you. There's so many things that the list literally goes on.
You know what? I'm so glad you're doing the podcast. Your enthusiasm comes out, and I'm loving it. Sure. How about you? How are you experiencing Black joy at this particular juncture of your life in Portugal?
Many ways. So Portugal is the gift that keeps giving because one of the things I love the most is the unexpected joy that happens. I did not expect to have such organic, beautiful connections here. I really thought this is going to be, me to have some me time, figure my life out, some soul searching. And the universe is like, no, we got you covered. You're going to have your sisters here. And being able to meet so many beautiful creatives, because when your mind is not occupied with toxic environment and just like microaggressions, guess what? It's like fertile ground for creativity and other things that you never appreciated. Little simple things like some days I'm on a gap year or whatever, meaning like I'm not working. I have an app that I built for the Black community, but I am not like working at a company. And some days I'm sitting in my bed looking out beautiful windows and watching the lovely cloud system. I would never have the opportunity to even notice something like that. Being able to just explore and watch the sunset and just really be present. If I had to choose one way in which I'm experiencing joy here, is the ability to be present. Not worried about the past. Worried about the future, not stressing about things in the past, just in this moment and being able to be present. That has been probably one of the most rewarding aspects, in addition to the community here, that I didn't expect it. And I'm so grateful. Like on the regular, me and Margo talked about this so many times. Yeah. Like it'll be a random Tuesday. We're having like at a vineyard of wine we're on a wine tour. And I'm like, this is really our life? Like, this is really our life. Like, it feels, I'm like, oh, you guys are glamorizing. Like, no, trust me. There are periods where, I struggle and I'm challenged with things because I don't know the language or things like that. But that's life, right? It's not, but the majority of the time is filled with a lot of peace of mind and just calm of just being able. I don't have the heavy cloak of racism on my back, like maybe like a light spring jacket or something, because it still exists, but it's not the heavy winter
I
coat
love
that
that
in
example,
America
but
you
not the
have.
heavy.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's like it's all racism's always going to be there, sexism, classism, all of the isms. But
Sure.
to know that on an everyday basis, my normal interactions, I don't freeze up when I see police here. I don't feel
Wow.
anxiety or angst when I see police, and so that's another really big difference. And same thing when I lived in London. But again, I want to give the caveat that this is all in the context of me being a Black American because of the class that plays into our experience as expats.
Yes.
Which our brothers and sisters from other countries are not always afforded the same luxuries that we get. And so, to Huete's point, you know, we have to kind of always keep it in the context of like as Black Americans and with the role that classism plays in our experiences, because I am fully aware it's not the same experience for everybody as I meet more people.
Sure. Dara, how about you? How are you experiencing? That was wonderful. Dara, how are you experiencing Black joy in new ways?
Like Shar, so many ways. And I was really resonating with what she said about being present. I don't think that I've ever experienced the feeling of being so present like now. One of my favorite quotations really connects to this idea for me. It's something like, we can't embody and ultimately realize the world that we want without our own healing and transformation. And for me, this journey to Lisbon has really been about my healing and my own transformation. And I have this space, like the literal space in my brain and my mental health in my body to focus on myself. I'm reconnecting with Diara, who I am at my core. I'm learning new things about me. I'm reconnecting with things and people and activities and explorations that bring me joy and bring me pleasure and aren't connected to any sort of outcome. I'm just doing these things because they feel good. And that's not something that I was connected to when I was in the United States. I was starting to realize, particularly in 2020, that my body was starting to have a physical reaction, a negative physical reaction to being in the space that I was in. My mental health was deteriorating. My physical health was not where it should have been. And I just didn't have the capacity to focus on my own wellness. And that is when I knew I need to listen to my body and I need to do something different. And so that's what prompted me. I literally said to my husband, I said, Jake, I am moving out of this country and I love you so much. And if you are able to want to come with me, I would love that, right? He's my person. So absolutely, I wanted that. But that's how it almost felt like I was suffocating. And there was almost this desperation that I needed to get out and I needed to listen to my body to make that transition. And so being here, I think I've said this to you before, Dr. G, that I don't think that I really ever realized what thriving feels like for me, for Diara, until I got here. And I don't know if Portugal is the forever place, but I cannot see myself going back to that space that I was in, whether it's in the United States or somewhere else in the world. I know different. And I feel so much more grounded. I have more space for creativity and getting back into things, art projects that I've set aside for years and years. And I'm reading for pleasure now. And I'm listening to love songs. I'm watching comedies, love stories, which is not my thing. For people who know me, that's never really been something that I leaned into. I'm happier, I'm brighter. Everything is easier here. Folding my laundry, doing dishes, walking the dog, sitting and having a cup of tea at the end of the day. All of these things are just lighter. And that is such a gift and such an incredible feeling that I will never give up. I think about, Shara was talking about her family members before her. I think about my grandmother and my great grandmother, a Black woman and an Indigenous woman, and they are always with me. And I think about all of the things that they did, and my mother too, to get to even give me space to do this, to make this possible. And their energy gives me energy to continue to center my happiness, my liberation, so that I can continue to do the equity work that I do. I mean, that's a big passion of mine. And so my liberation is what I'm centering, and it's been a big part of my journey here.
Man, wow.
You guys are
Margo,
amazing.
I know. I'm sitting here thinking,
Wow.
where's my passport? Margo, how about you? How are you experiencing Black joy living in Portugal?
For me, I would say like the biggest thing that I've realized is like I can just be, like I can just exist. Coming from Boston and growing up in New England, like there's just a lot of emotional labor that as a Black person you constantly have to put forth. And I used to work in finance. I worked at MIT for many years, and I was the only Black person in my department, and I was just like, yeah, it just was a lot. And so now that I'm here and I'm freelancing and I'm making my own schedule and I'm writing the stories that I really want to write about, that's so liberating. And it's like Shar said, like I don't have the weight of dealing or, anticipating a microaggression here. I haven't straightened my hair in a year. Like it's the little things that maybe my white counterparts may not have ever thought about, or having to explain, why my hair are in braids. Like I don't have to do that, So it's just the little things that I've really been appreciative of. And like my therapist, she even noticed. She was like, "You seem way happier." I was like, "Because I'm here, and I can live the life that I really want to live, and pursue the things that bring me joy. And I don't have crippling anxiety anymore." So, yeah, for me, it may not be my forever place, but I'm happy with how it's impacted my mental health in a positive way.
Margo, let me ask you. I would imagine when someone moves to a foreign country, and that language is probably one of the toughest barriers. And each of you can think about this question as well, because I like to circle back around to you. Other than language, what has been the greatest adjustment, or most challenging adjustment to being an expat in Portugal?
For me, I would say like the first like 4 or 5 months, I was still in my Boston mode, like in a rush to get to I don't know where. But even like my local like Portuguese friends, they'd say like, "You need to just slow down. Like, why are you always in a rush?" And I'm like, "I don't know." That's just how I've always been. And so just like it hasn't been a challenge, but that's something that I've realized like, wow, growing up in a place like the United States, you're always pushed to be efficient and to, just be fast paced for whatever reason. And here people just take their time, and like you see families out on Sundays, the whole family, they're going for a walk, or they're, getting ice cream and just enjoying the day. Like someone could just be going for a walk just to go for a walk. Like, so,
So the adjustment of slowing down. No, you did. No,
yeah,
it did.
but it's taught me to just like, slow down.
Just slow down. That's the big. So Huete, how about you? What's the biggest thing that you had to, the biggest adjustment?
I really miss my niece. She's
so
2.
Missing family.
Yeah, I miss my family in general, but I think I talk to them a lot. I probably talk to them more now than I did when I lived in New York. So like I miss them, but I really it's hard to watch how quickly a 2-year-old transforms from afar, because I so want to be a part of that. And I know the amount that I can be involved is limited, so like, yeah, that's definitely been the hardest part for me. And I totally resonate also with what Margo said, because for me, I still sometimes feel like I'm doing the New York hustle in a different city, and the scene does not make sense. Like I'm the only one running.
Oh my goodness. Shar, how about you? What other than language, what's been the greatest adjustment challenge?
Biggest adjustment probably I would say is dating. So because I don't know the language, it kind of limits the pool of men that are, like reasonable to date, because, I don't know the language yet. Even though I know it's an easy way to learn the language is to date someone who speaks that language. But I think that's the biggest adjustment, because before in London, you had like it was easy, right? You had a very open dating pool, and dating was really fun. And so coming here and feeling like companionship, like finding a companion, I think that's the biggest adjustment. It's just where I kind of just been like, oh, if it happens, it happens. Whereas in the London or even in the States, I'm like, oh, I'll find someone. Here I'm kind of like, oh, it might be a challenge. Or I might put in a lot more work. So that's a big adjustment because I miss male energy. I'll just be honest.
Sure. No. That's very
Yeah.
true. Dara, how about you? What was the greatest challenge or has been?
So I can definitely relate to what Margot had shared about just unraveling from that really fast-paced American mentality. That's present in a lot of other places, but for me, that was a part of my life in the US. So I can relate to that. And I think also for me, I have been kind of navigating through finding a balance between all of the events and the people that I'm meeting and all the things that there are to do in the city, and also just finding a lot of space and time and maintaining a good, healthy amount of space and time for myself. And I've shared this with all of the ladies here that I'm finding myself in a much more introspective place here, and it's been a really beautiful journey for me. I'm really enjoying exploring the city by myself and being by myself, and it really connects to what I said earlier about this is really a space and time for healing for me, healing from past traumas, healing from a lot of different things, and so my body is kind of hibernating in a lot of ways. And so for me, it's been trying to navigate this balance of wanting to be with my friends and explore with them, and also wanting to make sure that I'm leaving space for myself. I think that that's one of the things I was missing back at home in the States, is that I hold a lot of space for a lot of people in my life, and they hold a lot of space for me too, right? It goes both ways. And
Sure.
I'm really enjoying the space that I'm gifting to myself. So that's definitely been a transition, but it's been a really beautiful one.
Powerful. When you moved to Portugal, is there a large, or Lisbon particularly, is there a large Black expat community? Like, is that a popular hub for Black expats?
It's a growing one. Like, really,
Yeah.
almost every other week, I feel like there's a new, specifically Black women moving here.
Wow.
And it's growing exponentially. It's, to me, from the short period that I've been here, it just seems like Portugal as a whole is getting a lot of visibility. And then amongst the Black community, because with social media, people have access to get little peeks into people's lives. And I think visibility matters, which is why I started the Expat platform, because the Expat platform is for the Black community that lives, works, and studies abroad. And so we have an app as well.
Oh.
And so the goal was to increase the visibility and connections and just us to be able to find each other, right? And recommendations based on our experiences. So it was like, when I see what's happening in Lisbon, I'm excited, because I'm just like, I can't wait to see what this looks like 10, 15 years from now.
Yes. Shar, my sister's 2 years younger and has always loved to travel. She actually challenged me to travel for the first time internationally when we were in college, and it was to Europe. We went for a conference, but we spent time in Switzerland, Italy, and in the UK. And she's been saying in the last couple of years that she wants to live outside the US. And I was just thinking, that you're not Eartha Kitt, you're not, James Mary. Black people don't live out outside how does that work? And then COVID happens and technology shifts, and then you have Zoom and Teams. And when I'm listening to you talk, particularly as you talk about the creative energy, you talked about that particular DR. My sister's an artist as well as a social worker, and has done a lot of work in sexual abuse and domestic abuse work. She talks about how she feels when she's abroad. She spent some time in Mexico and said that there's a Facebook page for expats in the Yucatan and Merida. And so they'll say, hey, Barbara is going to be singing at this jazz club, and Sam is going to be cooking at this restaurant, and people hop on and meet up, and it's like instant community. So things seem to be emerging to really facilitate this. Has this been, again, we read about Frederick Douglass and folks, who did this, years and years and years and years ago. Is this a new resurgence, or has it been sort of in a crescendo mode that Black people have been doing this, or did COVID just really say, I'm getting on a plane, I'm getting the hell out of Dodge? I'm just curious about just hearing about so much of my sister, and then with you all, Did COVID really accelerate the idea of Black people saying, I don't have to live like this. I don't have to hold all this in my body. I don't have to live around aggressions. I don't have to let white people run their fingers through my hair when they're not my mates, my partners. I don't have to do this. And I can live someplace where the daily, who said this, Margot? Somebody said this, emotional labor. Was that you, Margot, that talked about the emotional labor? So I'm sorry, I'm talking, I'm going. Is the resurgence as major as what I'm perceiving, or has this just been happening just more quietly? But it seems like it's a thing now that people are flocking to.
These communities exist. One of the things I learned living in London, London has a very strong Black expat community, and it's a lot of offline group chats, right? So these communities don't always exist and are not as visible, perhaps, but I think now they're gaining in visibility as well. And that is the part that's so important, because where before, like whenever people say like, oh, we don't go abroad, I'm like, no, we have a large footprint. And one of the things, I'm sorry, I'm like probably over promoting, but I just, because it's the importance of it to me for people to know, like I'm trying to capture the size of this.
Please.
I'm trying to, one of the things we're building is the largest database of Black expats. Like, where are we? How old are we? What are our, backgrounds, things like that, because that's very powerful information. So that when people do have these misconceptions about what life like is abroad for us, we can show numbers. Like, no, actually, we have a community of 30,000 here, a community of 1,000 here. To me, these numbers are important. And so it was really essential for me to have a space, one that we own, but also we're capturing this data so that we can share and people can make informed decisions about if they are interested in moving abroad and find each other as well. So I'm like really excited, because I think the visibility is what's changing of this movement. I don't think the actual, I mean, actually there probably is more people now because of the visibility, but my whole point is we've always been abroad, and we have some amazing communities in the Middle East, in London, in Asia as well, like Hong Kong, in Panama, Costa Rica, Mexico. There's so many thriving Black communities. I just think the awareness of these communities is not as, like people aren't as aware, but we're out there. For sure.
I also think before there were two groups of people that I assumed could live abroad. And it was someone who had a job that took them abroad, or an entrepreneur. So if I couldn't figure out how to be one of those things, I didn't know how I could, in any imaginable world, come to whatever country I want to move to and still be able to maintain a living. What COVID did for me, and I think what it did for a lot of people, is, I mean, it changed the nature of work for everyone. And so if I'm going to be on a Zoom call anyway, and I can work East Coast hours, or, for my particular job, we don't have set hours, and most of it is done, on one-on-one meetings, and we can decide what time those happen. I just couldn't understand why it would ever be a problem. So then asking my team, like, I want to do this thing, are you all okay with it, felt very easy. But I did know that people lived everywhere, and I was excited about potentially doing that. But I really always thought I have to run my own thing in order to be able to do that. And I, still want to do that someday, but it doesn't feel like a prerequisite to be able to live anywhere in the world.
And you all are a very blaring reminder that the opportunities of America don't necessarily exist for everyone, that it is a great place for many people. There are opportunities and access, and they can live and dream and create free of microaggressions. But the fact that you're thriving as Black women abroad is sort of an affront that you can only truly thrive or be at your best at America. I mean, America is sort of like the Disneyland, the Disney World of the world. Is that supposedly the happiest place in the world, the most prosperous, and place with opportunities, and yet you're thriving emotionally. We all know that when we're present and healthy and in tune, our product, our work, our relationships are healthier. And so it's a loss for America that strong, powerful Black women like yourselves have to leave these shores to fully become who you were meant to be. But I'm so grateful for the confidence and for your ingenuity and for your brilliance and for your strength that allows you to step out and to do something that's going to change the trajectory of your lives and your own health. It really is amazing. And to your point, Shar, folks did that. Our ancestors came from outside of here, and those decisions were forced upon them, but still they adjusted. So we come from good, strong stock. But the fact that you all made the decisions in light of all the costs, financial, emotional, and otherwise, is just it's just really amazing, and it's powerful. But it's tremendous. It's helping me to understand my sister more, and what she wants to do and what she wants to experience. And the energy that you all exude is palpable. As you talk about what you're doing, it's beautiful. And it's not just sipping, port, or watching the sunset, but it's, as you mentioned, Diara, you're feeling more present in your own body. You're watching comedies. You're sipping tea at the end of the night. We're talking about extended life expectations. We're talking about living longer. This is amazing.
Like wholeheartedly, I have said this so many times to my mom and to some of my friends. I genuinely believe that by coming here, I have added years to my life. Genuinely, I wholeheartedly believe. And I stand by that, because the lightness, Margo, when you said the word light, I'm like, that's a really great way to express how I feel mentally and physically. Much lighter.
Mm.
Yeah.
As we are, we're winding down. I'm going to ask each of you just a general question, and then at the end, I want each of you just to take a moment to say whatever it is about the work that you're currently doing that people can follow, download, purchase, listen to. And I want you to be honest, I want you to unashamedly, promote whatever it is you're doing. We're going to put the links of it all in here. But, people listen in 15 countries to this podcast, all over the country, every state of the union. And so I want people to know how to follow you. So whatever you want people to know about you or to follow in your work, I want to give you a moment just to say that. But what would you say to people? Here's the first question. What would you say to people like my sister who are teetering on this and thinking, can I, should I, what would be the first 2 or 3 things you would ask them to consider in determining if they will make the move and where they would make the move? Just a word of wisdom that you would give to anyone like my sister who's thinking about living abroad.
Yeah. I would say what has resonated the most with me is I've given myself space to choose the path that aligns with my heart and soul, like truly. And that has led me to a place and to spaces in my mind and my body that I never thought it would be possible. It's led me to beautiful relationships and new communities and just new possibilities. I'm just thinking differently about my life. What Shar was saying about how it's added years to her life, that is absolutely true for me. And this move has changed my life forever. And so whether it's in Portugal, in London, in Ethiopia, in the United States, wherever that place is for you, lean into that. And COVID and just 2020 made me realize that truly life is very short, truly. And so what do I want to do with the space and time that I have? I don't want to work myself to the bone. I don't want to miss out on all these opportunities to explore and experience. And so lean into whatever feels aligned for you, wherever that is. And build that community. The Expat app was seriously such a grounding place for me to see other Black people around the world doing it. And so connecting to other folks and having conversations with other folks who are doing this wherever they are can also be a really great tool for your journey.
Well, thank you for that, DR. I really appreciate it. One of the biggest things, and this is a quote that I love, it's at any given moment, you are one decision away from a totally different life. And I think about what those defining moments have been for me. Obviously, deciding to move abroad is one of them, but trusting the journey, because guess what? Even if you do not like it, that is something that helps you to go forward, because knowing what you love and what you don't like is still, it's direction, right? It's guidance. And so even if the worst case scenario plays out and you end up not liking it, you can go home.
You can
You can
always
go
go
home.
home.
This is not, so, and then the last thing is just like, regret will haunt you more than failure. That's another quote. And I love that quote because
Ah,
it encourages me to just not live a life full of regrets and to just go for it. Because even if I fail at something, I learned something. Sometimes you laugh, you look back and laugh at it, like a couple things I've done recently. So it's like, I think it's important to just embrace. I think some people are afraid to try new things because they're afraid of failure, but that is just a part of the process. If you're not ready to fail, maybe you're not ready to succeed. Like, it comes with the territory, and you just have to get comfortable with that. So, don't be too afraid. I mean, the fear lets you know you're going out of your comfort zone, so it's natural, but don't harbor that feeling of fear to the point that it paralyzes you. Allow it to drive you in your curiosity versus paralyze you to not making any decisions or moving forward or trying new things, because this life is 100% for living, and you just really got to go for it. Don't be scared.
oh, I love it. I love it. Margo, how about you? What would you say to someone?
Um, I would say what's helped me, because I'm super introverted, I often tell myself I have to bet on myself. And
Mm,
so that means I'm putting myself first in my career, in my relationships. And it's a new muscle that I'm developing because I've not been like that my whole life. And so it's conversations I've had with my therapist consistently. And she's like, you have to challenge your fears consistently. And so those are two mantras that I really try to live by, and feel like in this last year, it's just radically changed my life. And being open to saying yes, even if it's a tentative yes. Um, so those are the things that I've
I love it.
really appreciated.
And Huete?
I resonate with every single thing that all of you said, of course, but one of the things that you said, Diara, that really I didn't understand until very recently was truly the idea of paying attention, going inward and listening to what you really need, why you want what you want, like getting to the core of understanding who you are and what you're looking for. And then this is my build on that, realizing that your life is run by the stories you've subconsciously told yourself this whole time. So if you want a totally new reality, I think for me, the biggest block was, how am I going to make money? I know that I want to live abroad. I know that I want what kind of life I want, but how am I going to make money? And there are creative ways to get around all of this, right? Because I think the practicality is super important. I need to feel financially safe in order for me to actually enjoy the rest of my life. The beaches are nice, but if I can't afford to eat, like it's not going to work. And there are so many creative solutions to get to where you want to get to, but it's hard to think about them when you're just running the old script, the old stories that you've always told yourself. So I think sharing and talking to people is what got me out of that. Talking to my friends, being like, I want to ask my boss this, but I'm kind of tired. What do you think? And it's like, they would encourage me to do it. And of course, without asking, closed mouths don't get fed, as Shar always tells me. So you gotta rewrite your
old
script.
school wisdom. That's old school wisdom. Oh, that's great. Huete, while we're talking to you, are there any projects that you're doing, podcasts and things that you just want to take a moment to promote? We'll have all the links in it, but anything that you're doing in particular that people could use to connect with you or your work?
Yeah, for sure. So I am hyperactive on Instagram. And
like
my Instagram handle is huete.gitana. That's HIWOTE.GETANEH. And that's really the social platform that I'm most active on. And every week I write a newsletter under Depth and Candor, which is the original podcast that got me into the podcasting game. But I have a weekly newsletter called Depth and Candor where I share my lessons on living joyfully. And if you're a part of that list, that's where you'll learn when, the Black Joy podcast drops, if you want to be involved in the making of it, if you want your voice to be included in it, the newsletter is where you want to connect with me.
We will drop all those links. That's fantastic. Margo, how about you? Is your cookbook your cookbook is out, right? The Expat
Yeah.
Kitchen?
So I have
So we'll
my
drop the
website.
link for that. I'm sorry, please go. We're
Okay.
gonna drop the link for that.
Sure, of course. So I have my personal website, margoscreativelife.com. And then I'm most active on my Instagram page. So you could keep up with where I'm dining and where's the best place to listen to live music. On my Instagram page is the same name as the website. And then my cookbook, The Expat Kitchen, is also available on my website and on the cookbook's website, theexpatkitchen.com.
I love it. We're gonna drop those links.
Cool.
How about you, Diara?
So I am the anomaly here. I am not really the social media person at all.
Okay.
I'm very disconnected, and I love it that way. So the best way to connect with me, I do have a pretty active LinkedIn, which will be in the comments as well. And then Equity by Design. That's what I live and breathe. And so, you know, if you're looking for equity-centered assessment, strategic planning, wanting to bring more diverse voices into your policies, into your decision making, eqtbydesign.com is another place where you can find myself and my colleagues.
Definitely. And they are known for fantastic work in our community and abroad. So those of you who are listening who've been trying to figure out how do you get some help, follow that link for Diara Parker and EQT by Design would love to help you with those kinds of needs. And how about you, Shar?
Oh man, so have to co-sign on Huete's newsletter. It is very good. So and it's really rich and it's very relatable. So I think I would encourage people to check it out. I really enjoy it myself.
Thank you,
Very
Shar.
few newsletters that I actually read, but I read Huete's. It's super insightful. But so for me, the most important thing for me right now is the Expat platform, just XPAT. And we have expat chats. So I interview Black expats and nomads who live all over the world about, every other week. We've done about 60 episodes. So, I mean, so many topics from living abroad, disabilities, studying abroad, living in the Middle East, just so many different very relevant topics for people who are interested. So you can hear straight from the horse's mouth, what it's like abroad. Those episodes cover about over 60 different countries because a lot of expats have lived in multiple countries. And then the Expat app, if you are just trying to find your people abroad. So the app is for the Black community that works, studies, or lives abroad. And we have over 2K members now, and we represent over 110 countries and territories. So we are out there. and it'll also give you access to the directory through the search feature, where you can just type in a location and see if there are other expats there based on the people's profiles, which makes up the directory. And I'm excited about it because it is the first app for the Black expat community, not travel, but expat, like actually living abroad. So I'm really excited about it. And I can't wait to show you guys like so many other things that are in the pipeline. So
I love it. I'm going to follow all of you, and I encourage my listeners to do the same thing. I've had a chance to visit a lot of places around the world, but Ghana and Mexico are two places that I've just really leaned into and thought in my retirement or pre-retirement, these are places I could at least live part of the year. These are places where I could go for the harsh Wisconsin winters and work abroad. And what you said and the joy that you're demonstrating is making me think really, really long and hard about making those things a reality. So thank you for the impact that you've had on me, that you've had on our listeners. This is going to be dropping soon. You'll get an email letting you know the details, but I hope that you share it in your network so that your friends and others can be able to hear about this. But you all have just done just a fantastic job of reminding people that we don't have to be oppressed. I love that you talked about taking care of yourselves and you weren't here to bash America, although America's got some things that it needs to be spanked about. So I'm not trying to give it a pass. But what I love is you made a choice and said, yeah, we can march, we can shut it down, burn it down, break it up, we can disrupt, we can speak, train, talk about, bias, unconscious bias. But you all just got your passport and said, well, we'll let someone else do that. We'll let somebody else focus on that. I'm going to go over here and make my way. So Shar and Margo, Hiwete and Diara, thank you all so much for for sharing your lives, for living your lives, for what you're modeling for so many people. And thank you for taking time in your busy, beautiful world to talk to me here on Black Like Me podcast. I really appreciate this. And this has been one of my favorite episodes.
Thank you so much for this.
Thank you.
This is wonderful.
Thank you for having us.
Oh.
Thank
So
you.
listen, people, we want you to listen to this episode. We want you to share it with your friends, share it also on your social media. Listen and learn not only about what these fantastic women have chosen to do, but also consider deeply what America does to its Black people and people of color. Frederick Douglass said, as he reflected on his new life in the Emerald Isle of Ireland, he said, the entire absence of everything that looked like prejudice against me on account of the color of my skin contrasted so strongly with my long, bitter experience in the United States that I look with wonder and amazement on the transition. Frederick Douglass said this ages ago, that there were places in the world where he did not have to worry about that. And each of these women contested to the same thing. So not only do I want you to think about the strength it took them to live abroad, but I also want you to ponder on the conditions that made that necessary. And for those of you who are non-Black, particularly those for you who are white, I want you to think what you can do, think about what you can do to rectify that, to disrupt that, and to not be a part of promoting that. All right. Have a great day, and thank you all for listening to Black Like Me podcast. You may have noticed that we're trying something new with season 6. I'm dropping episodes every other week rather than each week. Now, this is not because I don't have content, because I do, but it's because with new people joining the podcast all the time, and they're noticing that we have 150 episodes that are up, they want to go back and catch up. So this season, I thought, let's drop every other week so that we can do two things. Give people a chance to listen and really digest the episode so that they can share it before the new one drops. But it also allows my production team to do a little few extra touches that would help the podcast to sound even better. Thank you so much for being a part of Black Like Me. I appreciate the fact that you listen. Please continue to share.
Black Like Me. Black like me.
Thank you so much for joining us in season 6 of Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G. Now, I've got some special shout outs to the many talented members of our ever-growing production team. Eli Steenlich, who produces the show and handles all of our social media. Don Thornton, my podcast manager, who keeps things running smoothly and arranges all of my interviews. Jeremy Holiday, who edits the podcast. Corey Saffold, who created this year's theme music, and Marcus Fleming on the vocals. And of course, Jakesha Hunt, who is responsible for our fabulous new podcast merch.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. You can find out more about Dr. Alex G's amazing work at alexg.com. Black Like Me is sponsored by the generosity of the Human Family Unity Foundation.
Black like me.